Okay, so we have very personal meeting today, but this will be recorded for those of you who won't make it live. I would like us to start with a meditation or a centering exercise. So you can find a comfortable seat in your chair. And if you decide to sit on the floor, you can also do that as well. And we will begin with the anchor point of scanning the body. As we reviewed in the first session, it's really easy for our minds to slip away, for our attention to go somewhere else. And so let's use the anchor point of body scanning to be present. And what that means is it's an anchor because it really helps us root into the experience of right now. And so we can begin by taking a very deep inhalation, filling all the lungs with this new oxygen, allowing the diaphragm to go smaller, and gently exhaling, releasing, and letting go. And you can inhale deeply again. And gently exhaling. And use your attention to locate itself on the top of your head. You can sense the crown part of your head. Maybe it's even possible to become aware of the hairs growing on the top of your head. And you can travel with your awareness to your forehead. See if there's any tension that you're holding in this space. You can breathe into your jaw. Usually we hold a lot of tension in our jaws from anger that hasn't been spoken. And so I want you to allow yourself to travel to these spots in your face, like the spaces between your eyebrows, the space behind the eyes, your nostrils. It's like you're taking a tour inside your body to these places where we usually store some tension. And when we find tension, it's the same with the rain. We're not necessarily fighting it back. We're not asking it to go away. We're rather recognizing that it's there. And by breathing into that place, usually tension softens, but it only softens when there's an allowing of the experience as it is. You can take yourself to the back of your neck, your throat. Maybe it's possible for you to travel into the organs as the oxygen comes in through your nose. Maybe you can feel it traveling all the way into the lungs, and that how it influences the diaphragm to go lower. And as your lungs expand, maybe you can feel your rib cage, your chest. You can allow awareness to settle into the shoulders, sensing if there's any tension here, and allowing there to be a softening. You can even ask yourself the question, is it possible for me to relax? With each breath, making the body feel comfortable and safe. With each breath, shifting from the fight-flight automatic response to the parasympathetic nervous system, shifting into a rest and restoration space. Allow awareness to travel down through the arms. You can feel your arms in their entirety, and you can also feel your elbows, your forearms, your wrists, your hands, each finger. There's something about placing our awareness in our hands that is very beautiful. Maybe you can sense the energy in each palm of your hands. And you can travel up from the hands back to the elbows, the shoulders, sensing if there's any tension that was released. And as you travel down the spine, I want you to use a metaphor if it's useful. I'm going to mention it and you can decide whether you like it or not. When we find tension, it's usually a rigidity in our body, and that usually takes the form of ice. It's hard, it's contracted, it's it's hard, it's cold. And when we begin to soften with our awareness and with our breath, we can imagine that ice turning into water. And so again, from ice to water, and then if it's accessible to go even subtler, from water to vapor, traveling down your spine, feeling the rib cage, the belly. Stop in the belly and see if there's any sense of contraction in there. We usually hold a lot of tension in our bodies. It's layers and layers and layers of tension. See the relationship between your belly and your back, your hip area, your pelvic floor. Allowing there to be a conscious embodiment of that lower dantian area, the lower body. You can energetically breathe into the pelvis and see if it's possible to soften there. And traveling down through the legs, embodying the lower body. With each breath, bringing more liveliness, alertness, and presence. Sensing the knees, calves, ankles, feet, toes. Maybe you can even sense your nails, toenails. If your legs are on the floor, maybe you can feel that contact that the legs or the soles of the feet are making with the floor. And let that be a grounding opportunity for a connection with the earth. Even though you may be on a building or on some sort of structure, allow the contact of the earth with the feet to be a grounding opportunity to connect to Mother Earth. And feel that energy rising through your legs, up into your midline and then into your heart. And from your heart, you can let it radiate into the rest of your body. Maybe it's possible even to radiate into the room, into your environment, anchoring presence, anchoring in love, anchoring in the light. And allow awareness to now contemplate on your body as a whole. We're no longer traveling from part to part, but we're rather allowing ourselves to feel the entirety of this organism in its wholeness. There's no separation. And staying here for a few more breaths. If the mind drifts away, you can anchor it back with the breath. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and enjoy the present moment still with the eyes open. So namaste again. Usually the evening sessions are an opportunity for us to discuss as a group the subjects that were exposed. And you and I, Mariela and I, got a chance to do a discussion before we connected. And so I'm going to take the opportunity to introduce the second module, which is, I actually don't have a name for it. It's how Buddhist psychology can help everything that we've been studying. And so I'm going to share the screen with you. There you go. Okay, can you nod if you see it? Great. Okay, so usually when we think about psychology, because of our upbringing, it's very rooted in Western psychology from all of the different standpoints that we can take. It's really interesting to see the approach Buddhism has to psychology because it's quite actually linked with the Western psychology developments. And the beauty of Buddhism is that it always has this like opportunity to liberate oneself. I want to talk about the stages of spirituality, just many, but most sages have agreed that when we're looking at spirituality from a lens of, okay, what is spirituality? Trying to contemplate on what is spirituality, or even the concept of enlightenment, which can get really tricky to navigate and very new agey as well. There's three tiers that we go through. The first is awakening. That's the beginning, one can say, when we awaken from the autopilot, where we awaken from the trance that we were talking about, the trance of unworthiness, the trance of separation, when we awaken to the reality that it wasn't what we thought it was. And what's interesting with awakening is that it is literally as if you've woken up from a dream, and you're no longer asleep, and everything is like alive and new, and you awaken to the fact that you were asleep. And it can go in little doses. Like, I really like the gradual path. I don't recommend the use of any drugs, or I don't, because I think that we get what we need in doses. And some of us, like, there's this Christian apostle, I forget his name, like he was struck by lightning, right? Some of us may be struck by lightning, by a karmic event or a symptom or something that awaken us. And some of us may have like, wow, that's a synchronicity. Oh, I realized that. And then things begin to come together. Um, and I want to clarify, it's not that I don't support the people that do substances. I just don't think that it's the way. Because that subject in itself can get really contradictory. But awakening is that waking up. And illumination is when not only are we awake, but we're also illumined. Something lights up. There's this insight. There's this really, really funny story Tara Brach tells of, like, it's a cartoon and I couldn't find it, but it's these two hamsters are going on in a wheel, and one of them stops and the other hamster keeps going on in the wheel. And the hamster that has stopped tells the other one, I had an epiphany. So illumination is that moment where we need to brace ourselves with what we are processing at the moment. In fact, one of you who is not present told me that like needed to go and lay in nature. Like it was so overwhelming, everything, and just needed to like ground and integrate. And liberation, and that's illumination, because there's light coming through, and light comes through what? Through darkness. Okay, so we need to deal with the darkness, and liberation is when the darkness is being dealt with and we can open ourselves to life. And it goes in stages, and it's a process, and each moment is an opportunity to go through this process. And we go through one, and then we go through another, and then we go through another. It does not stop. It doesn't stop for me. It doesn't stop for anybody. And anybody who's said that is done with it, it's bullshit. No, just kidding. Obviously, there's a direct way, and I didn't mean to say it that way. That's not true. There is a direct way as well. And you know, you look at sages like Ramana Maharshi or Anandamayi Ma, Nisargadatta Maharaj, very, very advanced souls, right? But for those of us, it's actually, you know, the work is gradual. But it's also encouraging to see examples, and we can emulate and do the work. So when I first, one of my first months studying at the ashram and living there, the question of non-duality, or the whole point of non-duality, is that we are already that. We are already love. We are already God. We are already everything. And that's the main teaching of Ramana Maharshi, and the ashram's main sage is Ramana Maharshi. And so like I was like trying to grapple, like, okay, if I'm already that, then why do I have to wake up at 4 a.m.? So it's both. We have to do the work and receive grace. And there's this beautiful dance that happens in life. We have to open space for grace to come in. And this is very linked to Christianity. When I was a little girl, I grew up in a Catholic family, very, very strong dogmatic Catholic family. And hence it wasn't difficult for me to become a nun or an ashram yogini. And talk about personal subconscious. And I understood so clearly that if I wanted Jesus to enter into my heart, I needed to open space for him. And you can translate those terms to any terminology you want. If you want God consciousness, if you want the Buddha nature, if you want Satchitananda, if you want bliss to come into your heart, you need to do the work and open space for it. Grace will always come, no matter what, even in the darkest moments of time when we don't even know it. There's this beautiful poem by Hafiz. I wish I could show you in the moments of darkness the light of your being, the astonishing light of your being. So even in moments when we may not even cognize that all of this is true, grace can come in. But when we're going through this process, it's really useful to do that distilling that I was talking about in the beginning, that alchemical work of really purifying and seeing, okay, let's open space for this to truly bloom in my heart. And so I had mentioned earlier the cycle of emerging conditions. Um, the cycle of emerging conditions, as I was explaining, it's this like wheel. It's the wheel that the hamster is on, that the other realized it's like, I had an epiphany. No, it's the cycle of emerging conditions. It's when pleasure arises, we want to keep it. When pain arises, we want to avoid it. And we set, by avoiding it or by trying to keep it, we set that wheel going. Yeah. And what keeps that fuel going? It's the eight worldly dharmas, basically. I don't know if Buddhists, like ancient Buddhists, would agree with me, but I think it's a little bit accurate. Like when we want pleasure, we get pain. When we want fame, we get disgrace many times. When we want to gain, we lose. And pleasure, fame, gain, and must be the one that I need to work with. 1 moment, please. Oh, I had them confused. Okay, pleasure, pain, praise, blame. So we want to be praised and somebody blames us. Fame, disgrace. So we can be on the top and then eventually we can fall. And gain and loss. And this is what becomes, what gets us entangled in samsara. So back to the sensor, if you remember, it's that thick layer that is regulating what type of information can be made conscious to the conscious mind. The sensor is always trying to keep our ego or our sense of self in a state of homeostasis. And the state of homeostasis feels quite nice because it's everything is safe and we don't have, nobody has to worry and everything is under control and I've got things covered here. But that is not true because life doesn't work like that. Life is constant change, growth, gain, loss, pain, right? It's all of these things. And so the more that we try to keep things like smooth operator, you know, this kind of like censoring agency, the less we can allow life to transform us and therefore we can open our hearts, you know? So it's important to learn how to depotentiate the sensor, even to know that it's there, because that's when growth can happen. When we have that capacity to see and to contain and transmute our own energies. I love the metaphor of the phoenix, and Mariela and I were talking about this before we got into the group call. Allowing yourself to die and be reborn. And that can sound really nice, but actually allowing yourself to go through it and burn in the fire, and which is the fire of yoga, Agni. That's all what yoga is about. There's this one phrase that I love to remember when I feel that like acid of life, you know, like when you feel like something's burning you. The phrase is fire can't burn fire. The truth cannot burn, the truth will burn everything that is not true. Love will burn everything that is not love. And so we can begin to shed our skin. And self-sabotage is when we decide we don't want to do that. But again, this is not about no, I didn't allow myself to transform. I'm so bad. No. It's like understand that self-sabotage is actually a misunderstanding of what life is asking us to do. It's very innocent. It's very actually very cute. You know, when we self-sabotage ourselves, it's kind of like, oh, she's like really small still, you know, like still acting like a really young girl or boy. And so this misunderstanding of what life is asking us to do, which is usually like open your heart and meet life where life is asking us to meet it, step up our game. Okay, so we're going to go into the Four Noble Truths, which is a core teaching in Buddhism. It's very simple, as everything in Buddhism. It's like, and you're like it's really plain. They talk about dukkha. They talk about the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths, they build upon one another, like the layers that we were seeing. And so the first noble truth is the truth about suffering. So the Buddha here explains, okay, why do we suffer? And what is the truth behind suffering? So the truth about suffering is that suffering is inherent to life. It's intrinsic. Life involves suffering in the most obvious and subtle ways. This is the rawest form of spirituality. You will suffer. There is suffering. When life seems to be in order, we suffer because there's also anxiety. We get anxiety about work, we get anxiety about the dress we want to wear, we get anxiety about whether or not we're going to pay the bills. We're always in a constant state of anxiety. And this is where the concept of second arrowing is really, really beautiful. I'll get into it more in depth towards the end, but I'll mention this now. In life, two arrows get shoot. You know, like the arrows como flechas with the feathers behind. So life naturally will shoot an arrow. That's the arrow of pain. Things will hurt. But it's up to us if we shoot another arrow. And if we shoot another arrow, we don't shoot that arrow at life. We shoot it back at ourselves. And so even though things may be excruciatingly painful, the concept of the second arrow is very liberating because it means like, okay, are you going to shoot that arrow back? And it can be in moments of a lot of, tender, delicate nature, or it can be in little things like somebody copied an idea that you had and made a business out of it, and like it feels like an arrow, and do you shoot an arrow back? It can be any feeling that causes contraction. It will cause contraction. That's the truth. But do we shoot another arrow? Samudaya is the second noble truth, and it's the truth of the cause of suffering. So, okay, it's getting interesting. The truth is that we suffer, but why do we suffer? What's the cause behind it? And the truth of the cause of suffering is desire. And desire is caused by ignorance because we think that we are separate, because we think that we are somehow not in union with the world. We suffer because we think that the other is doing us wrong when really they're doing wrong to themselves, right? And what's so interesting is my teacher said this, Shunyamurti, I don't study with him anymore, but when I lived at the ashram, the most painful thing is to have to, it's the most painful thing is when consciousness or when pure awareness, where we're talking about our most genuine self, recognizes that we are still in ego consciousness and we haven't opened our hearts yet. That's the most painful thing to recognize, so many hours of meditation and still the heart hasn't opened. And so that's where self-compassion is really important, because that's the showing up, stepping up the game, moment to moment. Nirodha is the truth of the end of suffering I want to research this. Maybe I'll do another seminar on like the Yoga Sutras and Buddhism, because Chitta Vritti Nirodha is the first Yoga Sutra, like stop the sensations of the mind. That is yoga. So in Nirodha, how do we end suffering? How do we stop suffering? The truth of the end of suffering is when we stop fighting, when we stop resisting, and instead we begin to cultivate a peaceful mind. The peaceful mind is inherently driven by an awakened heart. It's not possible to cultivate peace if our heart is not alive. And the same, we cannot open our hearts if we are not at peace with the situation. The concept of mind and heart, of course, we have a beating organ that beats, and that's our physical heart. And of course, we have a brain that does all the biochemical processes. But when we're talking about the eye that thinks and the heart that feels, they're not separate. It's one whole heart, mind, core of who we are. And so they come with one another, and that's the integration. That's the work that one-on-one sessions is mostly about, is this integration of the heart and the mind, the work of meditation. There's this couple of beautiful metaphors that many meditation teachers use in Buddhism. One is recognizing that awareness is the entire sky, and that when a thought comes by, it's like a cloud that is passing by. And because awareness is so powerful and it can only focus in one thing specifically, it can either identify with the cloud and make the whole trajectory of the cloud and follow it until the cloud shapes form, and then you can follow it again and the cloud turns into a different shape, and then the cloud disappears, and then you follow another one. You can do that. Shift from cloud to cloud to cloud to cloud to cloud to cloud to cloud. Or you can also recognize and allow yourself to feel yourself as the entirety of the sky. And yes, clouds will pass. I don't know who said that meditation was to stop thinking. Like the clouds, the thoughts will go on. And you can allow yourself to open your heart to be the backdrop, the container of this. And another beautiful metaphor that many teachers use is the one of the ocean. Like pure awareness as the entire ocean. Just thinking about the ocean can give a lot of peace to one's heart. And so one wave can be a thought that forms, rises, and goes all the way to shore, and then disappears. And then another wave comes and it rises, it has its pitfall, and then it disappears. And again, the same idea. You can choose to follow this to the end, or you can recognize that yes, there are waves, but on the entire ocean. And I just read it, and there's another one that's really beautiful. That's the sky, the clouds, and the Atman is the sun, the Surya, that radiance. And so even though the clouds may occlude it, there's still the sun shining. And so suffering can end when I love the word purification. It's very Christian. It's when we decide to look inside and awaken consciousness. And the fourth noble truth is Magga, the truth of the spiritual path. This is when we do Mahya, magic. So the truth of the spiritual path is that we have the same possibility of walking this path as every other sage, teacher, every other mentor that teaches about freedom and liberation and living a life of virtue. And we'll get into that soon, but I was going to talk to you about the 2 hours, the two arrows again, but I think that concept was cleared. So I want to tell you a story that is that was very impacting to me when I first heard it from Pema Chodron. She's an amazing writer, let alone spiritual teacher, but as a writer, she's fantastic. And she tells us about the story of the farmer and the horse. I'll try to tell it the same way that she does. So there's a farmer that has his farm, and he has his beautiful horses on the land. One day, somebody forgets to close the place where the horses are at. I don't know how you say that in English. And the horses run away. And so the next morning, when there's no horses, the horses are the power of production of the farm. They're everything the farmer needs in order to produce a living and sustain his family. The horses are what they ride on. They don't have any vehicles. If you lose a horse, it's pretty bad. That's what we feel. And so neighbors come along and they say the same thing. Oh my God, you lost your horse. How sorry I am. This must be so bad for you. And the farmer is very equanimous and he says, could be good, could be bad. I don't know. Very, very equanimous. Wow. Okay. So the next morning comes along and the next morning comes along, they go out into the river and they find this beautiful stallion just there, like magically appears. And so they bring the stallion into the place where the horses are stored, and everybody's like petting the horse and trying to train him, and it takes them a couple of weeks to get the horse going. And then the neighbors come along, and every day they're like, wow, you got a new horse, that's so wonderful. He's so like vigorous and strong, and he's going to be the most amazing horse of the farm. Congratulations, this is so good for you. And the farmer is like, yeah, well, I don't know, it could be good, it could be bad, I don't know. And so as the weeks pass, the horse is getting ready to be trained. The son of the farmer, who is his most beloved being, decides to ride the horse. And so the son goes out into the mountains with the horse and they have a wonderful time. And when they're coming back, the horse falls when it's running and it falls on top of the guy. And so it takes them a while to make themselves back home. And turns out he has his leg broken and his ribs broken, and it's terrible. Like it's really, really bad. And so the neighbors come along and they're like, wow, I'm so sorry about your son. This must be really bad. I mean, my condolences. Like, it's going to take him a while to heal. We don't know if he'll be able to walk back, so on and so forth. 2 days from there, the army is drafting for war, and they're calling in soldiers for battle, and they're calling in soldiers from the ages whatever the son is at. And so the son cannot go to war, obviously. So everybody's like, wow, this is amazing, your son is not going to war. And the farmer, very equanimous, is like, oh, it could be good, it could be bad. And how often do we open ourselves to life in that way? Because it constantly changes and we get so like, oh, how am I going to deal with this? Oh my God, And it's what I was describing earlier is like the part that feels deficient, or the part that feels little, the part that feels incapable of handling. It's like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And then the compensating part is like, don't worry, we will solve it. We will do this and this and this and this and this and that. And then life is like something else is coming. Just brace yourself, So I'll let you sit with that one as we go into the Eightfold Path, the path to overcome suffering. So I really like Buddhism, again, because it's like, yes, but no, but yes, but no. So life is suffering, yes, but here's how you overcome it. It's like really methodic. Okay, so this is according to the Buddha, how we should be dealing with ourselves. So the first one is wise understanding. This is the first step along the way. It's the wise understanding is when we take a moment and realize, okay, what is the cause of suffering? Where do I feel this arrow hit me? And have I shoot the second arrow? Understand these arrows that come to us and how we shoot back. The second one is wise intention. When we cultivate the intention to stop suffering, there's this one Buddhist teacher, I'm forgetting his name now, but he was supposed to give this really long talk in a conference to talk about the cure of suffering. And so he goes on stage and he says, the cure for suffering is intention and attention. Namaste. And it really comes down to that. Why is intention? So many times we're driven by fantasies of the structuring layers that we lose our intention. And the intention doesn't have to be this dogmatic, like today I'm not going to cultivate suffering, because that's ridiculous. What is my intention at this moment? Like I always do this with the workshop, like, why am I actually teaching this today? Because it's always changing and the content changes every time I do it, even though it's the same theme. What is the intention that I have behind the things that I do? Even if the premise first was like, okay, the workshop is designed in a way that it can help people become more aware of themselves. It can help people gain tools about self-understanding. It can help people get more peace and in touch with meditation. It's the way that I sustain myself. It's the way that I pay for my bills, so on and so forth. But really, what is the intention there? And for me, it's always, this is where my medicine is. This is where I heal. Because if I cannot, I need to walk what I talk about. And every time that I do a workshop is an opportunity to realign in my path and go even deeper. It's my medicine. And so what is your intention for joining the workshop? What is your intention when you leave the workshop? And constantly really tuning in with attention where the intention is going. And the third step is wise language. Wise language is when we begin to communicate in ways that support clarity and allow for open-heartedness, open-hearted awareness, open-heartedness. It's incredible to see how difficult it is for us to communicate with each other, especially with our most, like our closest to us. It takes a lot of like precision and in internal work to recognize even what we want to communicate. I think a wonderful tool to enhance or to fine-tune this step is nonviolent communication. If you don't know about it, I highly suggest that you go into it. Again, it's one of these things, very simple, down to the point. You identify a feeling and you recognize what need is not being met or what need is being met and what feeling is being supported. And it's really, really helpful. There's other tools, but this one, I think it's wonderful to cultivate this step. And 4 is wise action. It's when we behave in ways that lead to clarity and to alignment. And we learn to cultivate our life's energy. Because I don't know if you've noted, the world's falling apart. No, just kidding. I mean, it is, but it's only because it's getting together in a different way. I don't know if you've noted, but there's a tendency right now for distraction, and we are not very one-pointed in our actions. With, social media and everything being instant gratification, we've forgotten the value of directing our energy in action. This is why I have so much respect for laborers, like the people who work manual jobs, because their attention is so refined. Like if you're a carpenter, for instance, and my husband Mike, he builds amazing things with wood, and it's like all of his family were carpenters, and Mike works in like heavy equipment operation and directing different. It's amazing to see, like you really have to be one pointed or you could lose an arm, like, and we've lost so much of that. And it doesn't that doesn't mean that everybody's going to go and chop wood and carry water, but I guess what I'm trying to say is, can we really fine tune our actions so that life is more seamless, And then why is health? This is interesting because I don't think the Buddha was, you know caring or thinking about if he should eat more kale or not. I don't think that's where we're getting to. But yes, to definitely support our well-being. And that includes the well-being of our body, the well-being of our emotions, the well-being of our spiritual life, our psychological health in a holistic and integrative way. And I want to share with you this tool. It's from the nutrition school I go to. I'm about to graduate in November. And this is one of the tools that, again, so simple. In the beginning, when I saw it, I was like, oh, this is so kindergarten. But actually, it's very useful because it creates this subset of our lives into an entirety. And we can see where some parts of our lives are just not falling together, or not falling, are not um, evolving as well. And the way that this tool is encouraged to be used is that you look at each aspect of your life, and you place, say you were to print this, or you could do this at your home in your computer, like you could place a dot. If you're fully satisfied in one area, you can place it really, really, really expanded on the circle. If you're feeling more deficient or something is not quite right, you can bring that point closer and closer to the circle, to the center. The closer the dot is on the center, the less satisfaction you have. The longer away, the more satisfaction you have. And so then you begin to trace a line between each dot, and you see how to balance the circle. So you'll get this slide. You can look at it later. But the point is that health is holistic. It doesn't matter how much kale and broccoli we eat. That's wonderful, fantastic. But what other aspects nourish our lives? And it's usually what it's called in IIN, or the nutrition school, and you can call it your own in how you approach it. But it's they describe it as relationships, really important aspect to nourish our lives. Can be loving relationship, well, all relationships are loving. Friendships, sexual relationships, partner, like whatever soothes that family life, friends, spirituality. It doesn't mean one religion. It means a spiritual practice that nurtures the heart. Physical activity, so moving our body in the way that is appropriate for our body. And career, so finding alignment in what we do. And that doesn't mean we have to change our jobs if we don't feel in alignment. Is doing the small works to fine tune how can we present ourselves in the most authentic way at our jobs. Sometimes that may also mean changing that. Sixth is wise effort. So when we learn to effort ourselves in the best way, it's very linked to the career path, to follow that thread. Like, how do we effort ourselves to bring our talents and our abilities to lead us to growth and maturation and development, and sharing those gifts with the world? It's like the archetypal function, efforting to channel that into the world. The seventh one is wise focus. The key to the end of suffering is intention and attention. That's it, wise focus. Cultivate the capacity to concentrate. I just love it, it's so simple. And the eighth one is wise mindfulness, and using mindfulness in the wisest way, cultivating our attention and our capacity to lead a mindful, balanced, and awakened state of being. And mindfulness, I think, could be described when we look at that metaphor of the ocean and the waves, or the sky and the sun and the clouds. That is mindfulness, our capacity to see the whole picture rather than to get identified with one nicky thing. Now I want to share with you this quote before we end. This from Pema Chodron, and she says, "Letting there be room for not knowing is the most important thing of all. When there's a big disappointment, we don't know if that's the end of the story. It may just be the beginning of a great adventure. Life is like that. We don't know anything. We call something good, we call something bad, but really, we just don't know." And so, my friends, this is the end of the workshop, at least module 1 and module 2. And usually we would open the floor for more discussion, but it's 6 o'clock and I want to be mindful of our time. Um, I'm really grateful for everybody who joined and also to have gotten a chance to check in with Mariel personally. Please, if you feel touched by this work or anything comes to your heart during this week, feel free to write to me. And if you have questions that need to be addressed, also send them my way. I don't know if I have the answer or not, but maybe there's some references or resources I can link you to. And again, thank you for your time and for deciding to spend your Saturday with me in this kind of way. I know it's a really unusual way to spend a Saturday, and I'm really grateful for your time and your desire to grow inward. And if you do feel this work is relevant to anybody that's close to you, I would really appreciate if you can share it and recommend it. And that's the way that it actually continues to be offered. And that's it. I hope you have a wonderful evening. Remember to write your dreams. And I'll be here for anything that comes up. I also want to invite you to the meditation training. So I've launched a meditation training that begins October 25th. So that's in about 10 days, less than 10 days, in a week, más o menos. Actually, yes, next Sunday from tomorrow. And I would love for you, all of you, to join. We're going to be meeting twice a week for 6 weeks, training on different techniques of meditation and different approaches to meditation. And they will have guided meditations as well as open floor discussions at the end so that we can fine tune these techniques and how it applies to our lives. So that being said, I wish you all a wonderful evening and I'll be here if you need anything. Namaste. Ciao.
Ciao.
Mm.